Welcome to today's video. As you can see, I'm kind of setting up here, and I wanted to do this so that I could show you this shirt. This shirt is from the BMW Performance Driving School down in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and I was there this past weekend with my two boys and another young friend, just having a blast. So now let's get the video in its proper perspective. So I've already got a whole series of Lotus Emira videos, so I hope you'll check those out. And those range from test drives to reviews to various facts and updates about the production of the car. I've also got some videos on the Corvette C8, which I test drove a couple weekends ago. Those are going to be a little different because that's a much more well-known car. So I will have a test drive, I will have a review that I did with my dad, that was a lot of fun, and then I'm going to do these comparison videos. And I'm not sure if I'm going to do any others on the Corvette C8 because, again, there are already so many Corvette C8 videos out there. And I want to make sure that I'm offering something that's perhaps a little bit different. Okay, so I've got my notes in front of me. I try to organize my thoughts on comparing the Corvette C8 to the Lotus Emira. So as a reminder, I've driven both of these cars within about the last 5 weeks. And so the experiences are pretty fresh in my mind, and I wanted to share those with you today. I'm comparing these cars for a couple reasons. So number one, I have a long bucket list of cars that I would like to own one day. And both of these cars are on that list. So I would love to own a Lotus Emira. I'm on the deposit holders list. And I would love to own a Corvette C8. This latest iteration, the C8 iteration of the Corvette, I find fabulous. I mean, I really like the looks of it, the sound of it, the specs, and the way that it's evolved in a lot of ways into like the big brother of the Lotus Elise, which I own and love. So those two cars, the Corvette C8 and the Lotus Emira, are similar in price. So again, I think it's a fair comparison. The C8 is a heavier car, right? So it's about 3,400 pounds versus the Emira, which weighs in about 3,000 pounds. Now, I don't want to quibble about 100 pounds here, 100 pounds there, right? I'm sure if you check different websites and look at different specs and whether or not it's got all the fluids in it or not, you're going to find different numbers. But the bottom line is that the Lotus Emira is lighter than the Corvette C8 by several hundred pounds at least. So that makes a difference in handling. Okay, I'm not going to make these really long videos. I'm going to kind of summarize things and how I feel about the cars based on the itches they scratch in my particular case, right? Which of my itches do these cars scratch, and which ones do they scratch the best, and which of those itches are the itchiest, right? So the things I have in my checklist are acceleration, cornering, rarity and exoticness, visual aesthetics, sound aesthetics, and whether or not it's still on my bucket list of cars that I would like to own one day. Since I'll be comparing a lot of cars, I've created Pete's Itchometer, which summarizes the 5 things that are most important to me about any car and organizes them on a 0 to 100 scale, representing their relative importance to me. This will help me organize my thoughts as we compare all sorts of awesome cars. Putting this together, I realize that I'm a very visual person, so I put looks as the most important to me. When I see a beautiful car, it gets my blood racing and brings out feelings of passion and excitement. Cars probably scratch different itches for you, and that's okay. It's still fun to compare and share how they make us feel. So probably the least itchy thing on my list, it's kind of like, you know, having a little itch in your nose, is the cornering ability. Now, don't get me wrong, I love being able to corner aggressively and just, you know, winding my way around corners. But I don't get a lot of opportunity to do that in my day-to-day life. And I use these cars as daily drivers. So cornering is just not all that important to me on a regular basis. If I were to track one of these cars, it would be much more important. So anyhow, that's just to say that cornering is sort of a minor itch, but I would have to give that to the Emira. The Corvette C8, with its larger size and heavier weight, it's just not going to corner as well. I admit I didn't have an opportunity to really test it where I felt safe. I'll include some clips of a test drive that I took on some very windy, twisty roads, but those were very dangerous roads, and I was unwilling to really open up and test it to its limits. That said, I'm pretty confident that the Emira is going to be better at cornering. The next itch I'm going to scratch is acceleration. And, you know, I think it makes sense too. It's kind of close to cornering in terms of one of those fundamental characteristics of a car, but it's a much bigger itch for me to scratch because I love to accelerate from a stop or accelerate while I'm driving. And I'll do that on a regular basis regardless of where I am. I don't get to dangerous speeds, but I still like to accelerate fast. And I also find it's helpful in navigating traffic, right? I love to be able to get out of a situation as quickly as I want. So this is more of a scratch, right? So this is like if you've got a rash on your arm and it's just bugging you like crazy and you're always scratching it all the time. That's the kind of itch that I think this is. So in terms of acceleration, I think I have to give it to the Corvette because the Corvette has a much lower 0 to 60 time. It's like under 3 seconds. The Emira is over 4 seconds, which is not that exciting anymore, right? I mean, my Lotus Elise can do that, and my Alfa Romeo 4C can do that or close to it. So, I mean, it's still a fast car, don't get me wrong, it's a lot of fun, but I have to give that one to the Corvette. Now the next itch I want to scratch has to do with the rarity of the car or its exoticness. And for me, this is sort of a medium scratch. It's maybe kind of like dandruff, where it's there and it bugs you periodically, but it's not like excruciatingly uncomfortable or anything like that. So I'll give that one sort of a medium itch. I will say that the Corvette looks very exotic, but because there are so many Corvettes out there, it loses a lot of that exotic nature, even with the exotic looks. So I have to give this one to the Emira. Now, the Emira is exotic. Lotus is a rare brand, depending on where you live. Well, regardless of where you live, you're just not going to see a lot of Lotus driving around. So that definitely wins there. It doesn't have really brash, exotic looks like other cars may have, but it is definitely unique, and it's a car that you will notice, especially in certain colors, like Hethel yellow. So I give this one to the Lotus Emira. Okay, this next itch we're going to call visual aesthetics. And I'm going to liken this to like when you have an itch in the middle of your back and you're trying to find something, like this pen or something, you're trying to get it down your back to get that itch. It's a really difficult itch to scratch, and I feel like visual aesthetics is somewhat like that because it depends on the design of the car, the color that they pair with the car, all kinds of accents. So in terms of visual aesthetics, I would have to say that the two cars are tied, right? The Lotus Emira has the more curvaceous lines, it's got a unique look, but I find it to be a little bit muted, especially when compared to the Avaya, from which it's supposed to derive some of its design cues, right? I really wish they had made some of those side vents more pronounced and just made it a little bit more exotic looking. Now the Corvette C8, on the other hand, it's got exotic, it's got the exotic design down in spades, but it's very angular and perhaps just a little bit too much. I still like it, don't get me wrong. I think it's a beautiful car, but it's very angular, and that's a very specific type of aesthetic, and I'm not sure it's my favorite. So anyhow, love that car, but it is very angular. So for that reason, I'm giving these two cars a tie on the visual aesthetics. So the final aesthetic I have, I'm going to liken to when you have like a broken arm and a cast, and you've got an itch that's kind of inside there that you're trying to get to and you just can't get it. So that's how I would describe how big of an itch the sound of the car is, right? The sound aesthetics. And what I mean by that is, how does it sound starting, idling, revving, driving, all those different aspects? And how does it sound both outside the car as well as inside the cabin, right? So that's a complicated issue because I think these cars fall down in different places on that spectrum. So the Corvette C8 has a very exciting, deep exhaust, especially when you put it into sport or track mode. When you start the car, it immediately revs high and loud. So it's like, and it really shocked me the first time I did that. I liked it, but I also, having rented it only for 2 days, I was at the grocery store during that weekend, and there was a time that there was a man walking in the parking lot past my car, and I waited to start the car because I didn't want to scare him out of his shorts. I didn't want to draw that amount of attention to myself right at that moment. And the best I can tell, that's not an option. That's just the way the car is. So you take it for what it is, and you either like it or you don't. Now the Lotus Emira, on the other hand, when I test drove that car, I was surprised that the exhaust wasn't more noticeable from within the cabin. So I was driving that car for about 20 minutes, and I was thinking to myself, that exhaust doesn't sound all that loud. So I actually rolled the window down, and still I was not super duper impressed, right? So I was like, not as deep and throaty of a sound as maybe I would have liked for a V6 tuned by Lotus. So at any rate, I would have to say I give this one to the Corvette. I'm going to provide some samples here in this video because I used the exact same setup to record the exhausts of those two cars, right? I actually dangle a microphone out the trunk of the car so that it gets the raw exhaust sounds right near the source. So I'll let you decide which of the two cars you think has the better exhaust sound, and you can post your answer in the comments and let me know what you think.
Mode, and you just push up.
It's not doing it. Does it need to be...
There we go. Yeah, it's in
Okay,
neutral.
gotcha.
And then we can just select sport mode.
I created this scorecard to summarize things. So the Lotus Emira wins in cornering, rarity, and exoticness. The C8 Corvette wins in terms of sound and acceleration, and I really think the two are tied in terms of looks. So the final thing to cover is whether or not these cars remain on my bucket list. And I don't know, I guess I probably have a fairly high bar for the cars that I have on my bucket list. Some of you might disagree, but you know, I have things like the Porsche Cayman, the Porsche 911, although that might be priced out of my particular circumstance. I would still love to own one. I try not to put on there cars that are crazy expensive that I'm never going to ever possibly own. There's no point in that. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about those cars. But as I said, Porsche Cayman, Corvette C8, Lotus Emira. In recent years, I had a Tesla Model S. I had a Mini Cooper S. I have owned Alfa Romeo 4C. I have an Elise. And those are all wonderful cars. So, the other one in there is the new BMW Z4 / Toyota Supra. And I want the Supra version because I think it looks great, and also because, you know, since I was a teenager, I wanted to own a Toyota Supra. Those were such awesome cars back then with their giant rear airfoils. So anyhow, those are all cars on my list, and I hope to own them one day. Oh yeah, another one is, I like some of the kit cars, right? So like the Daytona Coupe. That is a beautiful car, and I think I might be able to swing that. Or the Shelby Cobra. That's a beautiful kit car, and from what I understand, you know, they provide, you know, as good a driving experience and excitement, and so maybe one day I'll be able to swing one of those guys, or maybe both of them. So at any rate, both of these cars remain in my bucket list. I still love the Corvette C8 after test driving it. I still love the Lotus Emira after test driving it. I hope I get the opportunity to own those sometime soon, and when I do, I'll be sure to share my experiences with you then. So I hope you've enjoyed today's video, and I hope you'll join me for my other videos on the Lotus Emira, the Corvette C8, as well as all the other great cars that I test drive. Or any of my other videos, please comment, like, and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate your support. Thanks, and whatever car you own, have a blast driving it. Now the other side of that though is horsepower, right? The Lotus Emira only has about 400 horsepower with the V6 manual transmission, whereas the Corvette C8 has about 500 horsepower. So that's a big difference. Now the Corvette does not come with a manual transmission. It comes with paddle shifters and a dual clutch transmission. So again, there are some differences there, and I struggle with those differences because I really love a manual transmission, but I am sort of getting used to the dual clutch paddle shifting type of car, and what you see in the market, of course, is that more and more cars are going that way and getting away from the purely manual stick shift transmissions. I'm trying not to let that be a major deciding factor or not a litmus test for me. So things that are important to me in a car are acceleration. I love to accelerate fast from a stop. Cornering, that is very important to me. I love the fun of cornering aggressively. Top speed is not that big of an important thing for me. I have no desire to get a speeding ticket on the highway going 150 miles an hour or more, and I think it's way too dangerous, right? I mean, at that speed, you hit a twig and, you know, you could end up wrecking your car, or, you know, a deer jumps in front of you and you could die. I don't want to risk that. I don't want to risk losing my license because at those speeds you could be considered reckless. So that's just never something that's floated my boat or been important to me. So what else is important to me? Looks, those are definitely important. The rarity or exotic nature of the car, the way it sounds, all these things are very important to me. So let's start off by talking about livability. Both of these cars are much more livable than my existing cars, the Alfa Romeo 4C and the Lotus Elise. But they're also very different. So the Corvette C8 completely blew me away with the level of luxury features and electronics and driver aids as compared to the Lotus Emira. The Emira is, again, leaps and bounds ahead of the Lotus Elise, but when compared to other high-end cars, it really is lacking a lot of those flashy features and high-end driver aids and things like that. So I'd have to say I would give, in terms of livability, I would give the Corvette, definitely the edge there. The other thing is, for livability, the Corvette has more storage. It has a frunk. The Emira has storage behind the front seats, which is kind of weird, and then it has a small trunk space. So again, I'd give the edge on livability to the Corvette C8. Also in terms of livability is just the availability of a support infrastructure, right? So you've got, I don't know, maybe thousands of Chevrolet dealerships where you could get a Corvette serviced, as opposed to Lotus, where there are maybe a couple dozen dealerships in the nation, in the United States. So it's a completely different world in terms of that. Now that said, the Lotus Emira with its Toyota, and then in the i4 version with the Mercedes AMG powertrains, those are going to be pretty reliable, and you can have a Toyota mechanic work on that engine, although I'm not sure I'd recommend that.